It's good to see y'all. We had a great. I was here Sunday. I didn't miss any, but except Wednesday. But we were at the beach this week and had a great trip. It was good to get away. But we're glad to be home. We're continuing in the study of Nehemiah. Last week we got through chapter 6, and so just by way of reminder, remembering where we started in Nehemiah 1, we understand that the main theme of chapter 1 is that he is burdened by the news of what's going on in Jerusalem. And I say burdened because he doesn't take the news lightly, right? And so right away you get some insight into who Nehemiah is as a man. Now, there's a lot about who Nehemiah is as a leader. But as a man, he is a man that is very concerned about what's going on in his homeland. Even though he doesn't live there, even though he has a job as a cupbearer, he is very concerned about what's going on at home. And so in that concern and bearing that burden, we know that he prays. And his prayer includes praise, which I think is a great concept because in spite of the turmoil that's going on, he still praises God. His prayer includes confession of Israel's sins, which I think is interesting. He's not confessing of his own sins, but he's confessing Israel's sins. Now that's something to think about too. When we pray, obviously I think it's good that we confess and repent of any sins that we have. But I think as a whole, would it not be beneficial that we might pray for Christians? Sins that Christians might be committing that maybe we're not part of. But the idea that he puts forth here is that he's praying for the nation. He's praying for the nation. I think it would be a good thing to pray for the church in that regard, right? Churches everywhere, that we would pray that sins would be repented of. He puts forth a reminder of God's promises. How bold is that? That in his prayer he would remind God what he promised. And I don't mean bold in like a negative confrontational way. But he knows that God knows what he promised. And yet the reminding of it, what would the reminding God of his promises do for Nehemiah? Well, it shows his faith in God, exactly right. That's right. Right? So he's putting forth almost a statement of fact. You know, in James chapter 5, when James is talking about confessing our sins one to another, there is power in saying something out loud, isn't there? There's power in, you can acknowledge something mentally, and we should, and that's good. But if I were to call Don and tell Don, man, I'm really considering doing this today, and it's something sinful, whatever you fill in the blank. There's something powerful about me telling Don what it was that I was thinking about. Because now two things have to happen. First thing is that Don has to acknowledge what I've said. I've said something out loud. It's real now. It no longer just exists in my head. That's something I have written down on my desk. If it's in my head, it doesn't exist. It only exists once I write it down or once I say it, right? And so if I've told Don this thing that I'm planning to do, some sin I'm planning to commit, I'm going to go get drunk today. Well, I've told Don that. Now, Don has an obligation to me, doesn't he? He has to at least say, no, don't do that. But more than likely, he's going to be like, you know what? You and I need to get lunch real quick. You and I need to get together real quick. And to help steer me away from that, saying things out loud puts flesh on bones, per se. And so Nehemiah here reminds God of his promise. It puts flesh on the bones, so to speak. Right? And so he reminds him of his promises, and then he requests. He takes this prayer, and then he goes and he requests the favor to approach the king. And so he does. So in Nehemiah 1, we get a great picture of Nehemiah's compassion for his nation, but also his leadership qualities. We see right away that this guy is an outstanding leader because how he handles this situation. In Nehemiah 2, we know that he takes action. He goes and talks to the king, and we've talked about his relationship with the king and how he felt comfortable enough to go and ask the king. And then the king obviously gives us something about how he feels about Nehemiah. He lets him go. And not only does he let him go, what else does he do?
Here's some money, here's the charges, and supplies to do what you need to do.
Okay, here's money, here's some letters, here's some people. What else do you need? When are you coming back? And he lets Nehemiah set the date. You know, the king doesn't even say, I want you back on February the 16th. He leaves that completely up to Nehemiah. Whatever the date Nehemiah gives him is what he's going to let happen. And so he lets his cupbearer leave. Ms. Corman?
Well, I've just got a thought about something that you just said. It exists in my mind. It doesn't exist. But it does in God's mind.
That's right.
So what you're posing is just an additional accountability.
That's right.
Of what you verbalize.
Yeah, when I say it makes it real to me, doesn't it? You know, that whenever I say it out loud, now it's out there. If it exists here, but I don't say it out loud to anybody, nobody knows but me and God. To your point, but once I've said it out loud, it's real. Because now it's been heard.
It creates that higher level of accountability.
That's right. That's right.
But to the person it does always need to be a person of discretion based on the level of that action.
Absolutely.
Or the deed done.
Yeah, that would be probably on down the list of things that I would expect Don to do. If I called and confessed something that I wanted to do, I would expect him to hold me accountable, to stop me, and then also not go tell anybody. Right? That would stay between him and I. That's a good point. In Nehemiah chapter 3, the rebuilding begins. Right? So chapter 3 provides a detailed account of the rebuilding process, and it is detailed, is it not? I mean, we have details there. Why do you think that matters? That Nehemiah would be so detailed in his writing down of what was going on, which is another recurring thing we see with Nehemiah. He's very detailed. But what does that do for us?
To me, it makes it more real. He's actually there to say exactly what needs to be done. I'm going to tell you what all we have to do, but these are your jobs.
Yeah, it would be perfectly legitimate to say they rebuilt the wall. That's a true statement. That's what they did. But whenever he starts talking about locations and materials and men and the size of this or the height of this, it paints a more vivid picture in our mind, doesn't it, George?
It elevates it from, for us, it would elevate it from just a story or a myth.
That's exactly right. Depth. Becky?
It reminds me of the ark and all the details and the measurements, and now there's a recreation in Kentucky of the ark. Just
Oh, yeah.
see.
That's a good point. Yeah, so you can actually go and see what the Bible detailed for us. That's a great point. That is a great point. Ms. Carmen?
Well, even with the creation of the worlds, God, there were so many multiple, minuscule details, but it records it there because with each day, as he spoke his powerful word, everything was in place for that particular element that he created. So the details can get lost if you're not a good project manager.
That's right.
Especially in business.
Yes.
But really in anything, be it a list on a 3x5 card or on the phone,
Mm-hmm.
it's very, very important. It will get lost in that effort to really complete a task, even baking a cake.
Yes.
We women will get out, or we men will get out that recipe because there's so many elements involved, not just in the recipe, but the oven that is going to cook it, bake it.
Absolutely. I appreciate you including us in that because I love to eat cake, so you better believe I'll bake one. Don?
I was thinking too, culturally, there was a lot of oral tradition going back to Old Testament times.
Yeah.
And even carried through for the level of education, certainly up through New Testament times as well. And when you think about the Bible story, it's not merely a story to be read, it's a story to be told.
Yes.
And so having all of those details, certainly, how boring of a story would it be if it's all just high level.
Right.
No details. And in cultures that had that high oral tradition, they could be very detailed. And they would learn all of the names and places and all of those things. And that was something unique.
We're going to see that today in chapter 7, aren't we? Right there, we have a very detailed account of a census of sort, right? And we're going to get into that in just a second.
It is a record.
It's a record.
It's a record.
Is that not a faith builder?
Yes.
Right, that I can know by name who was there and who did what, and though I may not know who these people are, right? I often bring up the story of from Judges, where
Senior moment you have.
I am so tired. I didn't sleep very much last night. Adrian and Harrison Jones moved in our basement, and we were helping them with get settled in and stuff. The guy that fought the army with 300 soldiers, Gideon. I was thinking a different name altogether that started with a G, but it was not that. But we know Gideon's name. Some of us do. I don't, obviously. But we know Gideon's name. Who else's name do we know from that story? Nobody. Now, there were 300 men that fought that incredible battle. But Gideon's the only one we know.
That lacked what?
Huh?
That lacked what?
Yes.
A qualification by God.
That's right. But we don't know their names. But they were somebody to somebody. And so whenever when we do have a record of names, I may not know who these people are. Right? They may not be mentioned anywhere else in Scripture. But I have a record of their existence. And that is a faith builder. That is truly a faith builder. We get into chapter 4, and so they're rebuilding the wall, and what else happens? Are they getting support? Oh yeah, they've got external threats, adversaries, making a hard job harder. Right? You can imagine the physicality of rebuilding the city's walls and gates. And now throw threat of death on top of that, because that's what they wanted. Right? Sanballat and Tobiah are mocking the Jews, right? And they're trying to lead them into fear and discouragement. And Nehemiah is encouraging people to trust God. He reminds them of their strength, and he organizes a defense plan with guards and weapons. And you got guys working with tools in one hand and weapons in the other. But there's still a threat of death. That's really what Sanballat and Tobiah want. They want them dead. And in chapter 5, we get into that. There's an economic hardship, right, that creates a crisis as wealthy Jews exploit the poor Jews through the usury and debt slavery, right? So Nehemiah is angered by the oppression that's going on. He convenes an assembly and he rebukes these nobles. He rebukes the officials, urges them to return the lands and stop charging interest. And what does that do? Makes them even more mad. I mean, you're just poking this bear. All the while you're rebuilding this seemingly insurmountable physical task. And so then in Nehemiah 6, the opposition intensifies. It doesn't lessen, right? It doesn't get weaker. It gets stronger, right? Sanballat and Tobiah resort to various schemes to distract and intimidate, and they do mention kill Nehemiah, And so how do they do that? What all tactics are they using? Shaming him. What about deception? Is there deception there? When he sends this letter, is it true? No, he's claiming outright falsehoods, right? In this letter, and so there's deception, there's false accusations, there's fabricated prophecies even, right? He says, well, Nehemiah is claiming prophecy. I mean, and Nehemiah never does that. And so Nehemiah refuses to be diverted by this. How does Nehemiah address it?
He just calls them right out, you're lying. These are all lies. I'm not, they accuse me of rebellion. I'm not rebellion.
He's like,
No time for you.
that's right. He's like, no, I'm not, and goes back to work. And I love that because it's just so, he's just like, it doesn't bother him. He's unbothered by their attempts. He's going to stay on task. He's going to stay focused and keep rebuilding this wall. He's like, none of that's true. And then he goes on, right? He keeps working. And so in chapter 6 then, how does it end? They built the wall. The wall's built in 52 days. We would be eerily skeptical of a house built in 52 days, wouldn't we?
Yes.
You throw up a house in 52 days, what are you going to be worried about? Everything. You're going to be worried about the foundation. You're going to be worried about the framing. You're going to be worried about the electrical, the plumbing, the HVAC. The finished work is not going to look good, right? You build a house from the ground up in 52 days, don't buy that house. Yeah, that's right. But here, they built a wall in 52 days. What does that prove?
It can be done.
It can be done, but what else? God was with them. That was the big picture thing.
It's not just doing one whole wall, but if you look at the details, there's so many sections, so many gates. These are not small gates, they're large gates.
Right.
It took a lot, that's why I said it's depth. He gives us depth. You're in construction, I'm in construction. That tells me how much detail, time it took to do it. And when Tobias and Sandow said, made the action, well, if a fox runs up on that wall, it's going to fall down. That's how flimsy it is. No, not for the detail.
That's right. And so these first 6 chapters give us themes. Every chapter seems to have its own theme. Becky?
Also, to say it shows that you come together and you all have a common goal.
Oh, man, yeah. There's something to be said about unity there, isn't there? That if there's a leader and there are followers, when they come together in purpose, a lot of good can be done. Is everybody there exactly the same? I think sometimes that's what we think unity means. Everybody looks the same, talks the same. That unity somehow means, uniformity. But that's a whole different word, isn't it? Uniformity has nothing to do with unity. It can go along with unity, right? Military wears a uniform, right? Matt could tell us about that. Retired, by the way. Congrats to Matt. There's something to be said about uniformity in unity, but unity truly, when you look at the New Testament church on the day of Pentecost, how many different kinds of people did you have there? Yeah, people from all over, different countries, different cultures, different ethnicities, right? Different languages, different practices. You have all these people from all over the place. You talk about diversity. It's diverse at Pentecost. And what happens?
They call it, most of them come to understand.
Yeah. You got all these people come together in the water and come out of the water united. Right? We know that was where the church began, and you got 3,000 plus. And I say plus because we don't really know how many there were. I mean, we know 3,000 men were recorded. But if you're including wives in that, let's just pretend half the men are married, you got 4,500 people or more.
Just in that, like
In their own language.
These people that did not have the carpentry ability, and he made this happen with people who were lazy.
That's right. Absolutely. You know, and so God uses people from every walk of life for his purpose. We see it in the inception of the church. The church went and spread through the book of Acts like it never has again. The church spread more during those times of intense persecution than it ever has. You know, and I know we talk often about hard times coming for America. And don't take this the wrong way, but sometimes I kind of wish they would. That there will be some sort of resurgence like that. We're very comfortable here. You know, because of our comfort, maybe that's the reason the church isn't growing. You know, we can pick and choose. You know, we have options. And so we're just kind of comfortable, and comfort often breeds, dare I say, laziness.
Yeah, lazy,
Complacency, right?
You go back to World War II, how the nation responded to
Oh, yeah.
the evil across the world.
That's right.
9/11. We all know what happened after that.
I had just become a Christian right after 9/11 happened.
Even denominations grew and people turned more.
Oh, yeah. Well, just faith in general exploded. Because I can remember not being a Christian and driving past church parking lots, and you'd notice, like a lot of places, half full. After 9/11, and because I become a Christian, now I'm paying attention, there were people parking in the grass because the parking lot was full. It's amazing what a crisis does. You know, I'm not wishing that would happen. I'm just saying that persecution in this regard grew the church. And it wouldn't have grown without that sort of, what Becky's talking about, this unity. And we see that here in Nehemiah too. You got all these different people from all these different walks of life. And like you said, maybe they don't have carpentry skills. Maybe they don't have building knowledge. And yet, under Nehemiah's leadership, under strong leadership, and an intentional focus, and most importantly, God being with them, they not only did an insurmountable job, they did it under persecution. It's amazing. It's amazing what they did here. So we get to chapter 7. And before I get into that, any other comments or questions about the first 6? Don.
I just want to reinforce the idea that about unity. It's not you and I being the same, having the same thoughts. It's not even necessarily about us agreeing, but it is that singleness of purpose. You know, I'll tell you as well. What makes when the military is really effective, it's not because they're wearing the same uniform. It's because of the mission that they have.
That's right.
And it's that singleness of purpose that we're all focused, each having our own individual tasks.
Yeah.
But all aligned with whatever that mission and purpose is. And the same thing as Christians. We're all members of the same body, but don't all have the same function.
That's right.
And yet the purpose in glorifying God and edifying one another, that is what brings us together. And as long as that's our focus, okay.
Absolutely. Becky?
I have one more comment about sometimes in life you think nobody, you're not important, what you do is maybe not important. But look back at the Bible, and in the scriptures are these names that you can't pronounce. But
Yeah.
God
Or I forget.
So they might have thought, what I'm doing is, whenever you remember, God remembers your name, He remembers how many people are in your family to exactly number. So, I'm not saying you should do things to be written in a book, but know that God remembers. And He knows every little thing that you do and how you contribute to the growth of the church or family,
Well, you know, in Luke's gospel, when Jesus sends them out by twos, right? He tells them that their names will be remembered in heaven. That's pretty important to remember too. You know, that maybe nobody remembers your name here, and that's okay. God is the one you want to remember your name. That's a great point. Excellent point. All right, so moving on into chapter 7. Last week I had asked everyone to read this on their own, because we were going to hit the first 7 verses and study those, and then we were going to pick up toward the end of the chapter, verse 60, and study on from there. Because what we have here is a detailed account of the people who were here, the census of the first returned exiles. And it's important, but I'm not even going to try and murder these names, because that's exactly what would happen. But what we have here, I don't want us to miss how important these are. And so I'm not going to out loud read these names to everyone. I hope that you did that on your own. But we're going to talk about why it's important that we do have these names. Right? Maybe we'll have a class sometimes on learning how to pronounce Old Testament names. We'll go to 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and we'll push our way through those first couple chapters. But I don't want us to miss the importance of this chapter, because there's a lot here to consider. And so what I want to do is I want to read verses 1 through 6, right? And then I'm going to pick up in verse 60 and then try to get through the end of the chapter. There's still some names in here that we're gonna struggle with, but I want us to see what's going on in this chapter. So the wall is built, the work is done, and in verse 7 it says, "Now it happened when the wall was rebuilt, I had made the doors to stand, and the gatekeepers and the singers and the Levites were appointed. That I commanded Hananiah my brother, and Hananiah the commander of the fortress, to be over Jerusalem, for he was a faithful man and feared God more than many. Then I said to them, the gates of Jerusalem must not be opened until the sun is hot. Until they are there standing guard, they must be shut and bolt the doors. Also have guards and inhabitants of Jerusalem stand each at his post, each in front of his own house. Now the city was large and spacious, but the people in it were few, and houses were not rebuilt. Then my God put it into my heart that I gathered the nobles and the officials and the people and recorded their genealogies. Then I found the book of the genealogy of those who came up first, and in it I found written, these are the people of the province who came up out of the captivity, the exiles whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, has taken into exile, who returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to his city." Now jumping over to verse 61. Verse 61 says, "Now these were those who came up from Telamala, Talaharsha, Cherub, Adon, Immer, and they were not able to declare their fathers or their fathers' seed, whether they were of Israel or the sons of Deliah, sons of Tobiah, the sons of Nekoda, 642 of the priests, sons of Hobiah, sons of Hakaz, sons of Barzillai, who took the wife and daughters of Barzillai, the Gileadite, and called by their name. These searched in genealogical records could not be found. Therefore they were considered unclean and excluded from the priesthood. And the governor said to them that all they should not eat from the most holy things until a priest stood with them, Urim and Thummim. The whole assembly gathered together and was 42,360, besides the male and female slaves, of whom there were 7,337. And they had 245 male and female singers. Their horses were 736, their mules 245, their camels 435, their donkeys 6,720. From among the heads of the fathers' households gave to us the work. The governor gave the treasury 1,000 gold drachmas, 50 bowls, 530 priests' tunics. Some of the heads of the fathers and households gave the treasury the work of 20,000 gold drachmas and 2,200 silver minas. That which the rest of the people gave was 20,000 gold drachmas and 2,000 silver minas and 67 priest tunics. So the priests and the Levites and the gatekeepers and the singers and some of the people and the temple servants and all lived in their cities. And then the 7th month came, and the sons of Israel were in the cities. There's a lot going on here, even in the verses that I skipped. Just think about what I just read in the verses that happened. It's a lot of detail. We have numbers, exact numbers, right? They don't say, well, around 1,000 or around 2,000. We have 2,200 listed. We have 735 listed. We have exact numbers given. Why is that so important? And again, I'm just emphasizing and reemphasizing the record. This is stuff that can be verified, couldn't it?
Well, and by that record, they were able to, and my old King James Version says that some, based on the records of genealogy, were polluted. They could not ascertain, so that's why the records were important. It was critical.
Critical, very important. Very important. That's it.
God said he'd bring a remnant back.
That's right.
How large the population of Israel was taken into captivity?
A lot more than they got back. He even says the city's large,
And not full.
but not full. Right? The people were few.
One thing that struck me too, looking at this, and my daily Bible reading, I'm kind of in the time of Solomon, you see the contrast between the wealth and just some of the numbers, the number of sacrifices, the amount of money that was being, or gold that was being mined. The silver, a verse recently was like, silver meant nothing, in the days of Solomon. It was common as
Yeah.
dust, right? And
Not so much here, right?
not so much here. What a big difference in those, hundreds of years to get to this point. And yet God still with it.
Yes.
Well, and even the livestock, there were precise numbers for every breed of livestock that they had.
Right. And that's going to matter, especially if you're someone who is getting that. That allows you to do things like budget. I mean, we don't think in terms of budgeting livestock because we get all our livestock at Winn-Dixie. But the truth is if you're trying to budget, you're trying to plan, you need to know what you got to work with. Right? And so that's what Nehemiah did. Right? This is the answer to the first question here. And why the actions were so important. He wrote it all down, not just for the record for us, but for them. They could budget. They could plan. They could rebuild. That's really what this is about, isn't it? This is about rebuilding the city that's been destroyed. That takes us all the way back to chapter 1. That's the reason Nehemiah was so discouraged and upset, because by this point it should have already been at least happening to some degree. There were people that had already been sent back and it wasn't happening. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so their labor wasn't in vain, was it? I mean, they were awarded, hey, you were here, you helped. This is for you. But I think it's critical to see the precision that's being put forth here. But this would truly allow people to rebuild this city. Yes, sir.
When you read the background, it appears that when Cyrus gave the order or the decree that anyone that wants to return can return, and so they were led by Zerubbabel to go back, and 42,000 people went. Well, it appears that there's only 5% of the Jews that were in Babylon at that time. So most of them were born there. They didn't want to go back, and only 5% of them said, well, we'll go back.
Yeah.
We'll help rebuild.
Wow.
Yeah, and so, they were already, that's their home.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jerusalem, and it's not there.
Why would I go back there?
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of work.
Yes.
That's a good point. It's a great point. So what qualities did Nehemiah seek when choosing Hananiah for the leadership? In verse 2, what qualities was he looking for? Look at verse 2. Faithful and fear the Lord. Are those two things not the same?
They're sister qualities.
That's right. They're hand in hand, but they're not exactly the same thing.
They're like glue.
That's right. And so he's looking for both of these things. I want you to be faithful and I want you to fear God. Because there are people that can fear God and not be faithful. Right? Now, your faithfulness might say something about you if you don't fear God, if you don't revere God. But the point is he emphasizes both qualities. And so these two qualities are going to be extremely important for governing Jerusalem. Because what led to this? What led to the captivity? Unfaithfulness. I hadn't forgotten that. And what's fun, how old was Nehemiah when this happened? It's a trick question. When Jerusalem went into captivity? He wasn't born yet. That was a trick question. It was a trick question. He wasn't even born yet. But he knew that Jerusalem, the Israelites were taken into captivity because they weren't faithful. And so he is wanting to implement from the get-go that if we're going to rebuild this thing, we're going to do it the right way. We're going to go back to how it's supposed to be. That we're going to be faithful people. We're going to be God-fearing, faithful people. That's how we're going to lead this city back to what it ought to be. It's a great plan. When you're dealing with people, though, it can be tough. Yes, ma'am. And then,
That fearing and faithful quality that choosing entailed was among many, because my version says among many. So that says that you're not pulling from 5 people or 10 or 100,
right.
but hundreds.
Hundreds. That's exactly right. Don?
So they stood out.
Yes.
There's a little bit of a parallel here. It's something you just said about him having been born, and that it reminds me of going back to, was it Numbers 14, I think, in that area, where you've got the people that were supposed to go into the land that because of their lack of faith, their faithlessness, that didn't go, and their claim was, I'm worried about my kids. And so what did God say? It said, well, you're not going to go in the land, but your children that you're so worried about, they are the ones.
They're going to go.
And so, in the Tinkle's comment, if only 5% are going back in that 70 years, chances are a lot of these people that went back were not alive then.
Yeah.
And you know, and were born in captivity. So that says something, I think, about them as well. And maybe that's another way that God is honoring them by mentioning all those names. There's something about their strength of character to go to a land that perhaps many of them did not know.
Right.
And to serve a God that maybe they didn't know all that well either. So there's a lot of things happening.
A lot of things happening. Becky?
Don't you find it interesting that when we look for a leader, like we always see how they are politically, or if they have any military background, it's like so important to us. But Nehemiah put that on the back burner. That's important, but he chose someone who's put God first spiritually leader. A spiritual leader was more important to him than
That's right.
all the others.
That's right. Strange parallel. We often think about that when we're considering elders for the church, don't we? You know, that if someone's a great businessman, well, they'll be a great elder. Not necessarily. Now, they can be, right? Good businessman can be a fantastic elder. But the church isn't a business, right? This is a family. This is not a business. You know, preachers aren't salesmen. Deacons aren't managers. Elders aren't CEOs, right? Elders are shepherds, right? And so, you know, when you're looking at those qualities, that's why we emphasize so much on the spiritual. Yeah, listen, a businessman can be a great elder, but that's not one of the qualities that we're listed to look for, is it? That's a great observation. So why did Nehemiah order the gates to remain closed until the sun was hot? And what does this show about his leadership?
Well, if the gates are not closed, it allows riffraff in and out. And I know I was eager to go to the end of that chapter 13. I mean, they were disobeying laws, God's, and even selling on the Sabbath.
Yeah,
And he had to smite some of them.
yeah,
Now, I had to run a reference quickly on the smoting.
yeah.
You know, not
Yeah.
So what it entailed, what it really entailed was that they had corrupted the Sabbath day.
Yes. That's exactly right. So keeping the gates closed helps deter problems, doesn't it? And so again, what does it say about his leadership? He's got foresight. Right? One of the things about being a good leader is being able to see around corners. Right? How do you predict the future? Looking at the past. Right? And so Nehemiah clearly can do that. Right? He can clearly know what's ahead because he knows how people are. That's really all we're doing. If you know how human beings are prone to disobedience. Right? Not because we're born that way, but because we're programmed that way. Right? We learn it from our environment. Yes, ma'am. He's going to enforce, that's right. He's going to enforce what the wall represents. Protection. Boundaries. Right? Safety inside those walls. When I was a kid, man, I wasn't allowed to go past this stop sign a few houses down or past this stop sign. But in between those two stop signs, man, we could do whatever we wanted. We rode our bikes. We played war. We, had water fights. We had a ball. Pine cone battles. You ever have a pine cone battle? Man, this thing will tear you up. But we could do that. It's like in between those two stop signs, we didn't have total freedom. Obviously, we still had rules, but we just weren't allowed to go past those signs. That was for our safety. Because we were in eyeshot of all of our parents. And we could just have a ball on the street in the summertime. Because there was safety in those boundaries. And that's what Nehemiah is seeing. He's like, keep these gates closed until the sun is up. Keep the riffraff out. Let's keep this place safe. We're trying to clean it up. We're trying to enforce what it is we came here to do. So how did Nehemiah ensure the city and its people were safe? Well, we just talked about that. But what can be learned from this about the importance of security? It was just touched on. Being vigilant. It's so easy to let things slide, isn't it? Right? It's exhausting. It's exhausting to be the one that always has to say, we're not going to let it slide. Hey, can we let it slide today? No, we're not. It's exhausting to be that one, right? To be that voice, to say, no, we're going to do things the right way. You especially see it a lot, with vacations. A lot of times folks take the perspective, well, I'm on vacation, so I don't have to go to church. How much of a pain is it to go to church when you're out of town? You got to find one. You got to vet it a little bit. You got to go there.
How much time did you spend planning your vacation?
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly right. But that's what I'm saying. It's hard to be vigilant, right? But because it requires work, effort, determination. Ms. Carmen?
Well, part of the security, there were breaches internally already because of the marriages.
Yes.
But because some that were Jews, had taken men and even married daughters of the Jews, men and women, that worshiped Ashdod. And this was like one of the seat of the worship for the Philistines.
Yeah.
Now, you take a man and a wife, there's some of that influence that is very negative to Jehovah's laws that's going to corrupt internally.
That's right.
So from a security point of view, from a spiritual point of view, he was protecting the spirituality.
That's exactly right. This is all what we can see from these first 4 questions, and we'll have to get into the rest of these next Sunday. We'll pick up here in chapter 7 next Sunday. But the emphasis, clearly, from this great physical undertaking is all about spirituality, isn't it? This is about not just restoring Jerusalem as a physical city. This is about restoring Jerusalem as a spiritual city, a city of God. We'll pick up there next Sunday. Thanks so much for the comments.